Come gather, good people, I'll sing ye a song of whales on the shoreline, laid heavy and wrong. The tide bore its burden, a sorrowful sight. The strandings o' the firth in the dead o' the night. They came in their hundreds, the dolphin, the whale, driven to shallows with a sorrowful tale. The learned men muttered on nets and no noise, but the seas bear a tally that none can disguise. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men. They'll talk all the weather, they'll talk all the storm. They'll scribble their numbers to keep with the norm. But the count only rises, the carcasses show a reckoning carry wherever tides go. From Rasse to Moray, the tidings run grim. The porpoise and mink now drift at the brim. Yet silence in council halls buries the cost, for silver and power would sooner them lost. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men. And if ye should wander the shoreline at dawn, where once the great singers and dancers had gone, remember the silence, remember the sound, the strandings o' the firth where the warning is found. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men.
Hello everybody, welcome back. It's October something. Thanksgiving, there you go. It's the first time in a long time I didn't have to look up the date. I still got to do it now because I said it out loud. I can't see that far tonight. I got new progressive glasses. Today's the 12th. Today's the 12th. Look at that great big carbon-free nuclear power plant. Biggest construction site on the planet. No, it's carbon-free, didn't it? Meet Tonya. She's the government's best friend. Disguised as a, I'm not attacking her, I'm just saying, like it is. As a marine animal response society. These types of people don't care if you do anyway, right? They're a huge charitable organization dedicated to marine animal conservation and Canadian. So their job is to displace any real people. They're very, this was on their site. They said they can't do a necropsy because it's too difficult to do it there, which is simply not true. I can show you loads of stuff over the years that we've covered. Just these pictures on the site, you could definitely do a necropsy. They want the natives to tow it to somewhere convenient for them, allegedly, right? But they show you those two on their site. That's kind of interesting. But this is what the major media is showing you. You're looking at the shoulder blades, for goodness sakes. The rib cage is clear. It's deflated. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of this. This is a normal-looking dead whale. Sperm whales, of course. We we've covered a lot over the last 14 years of sperm whales. Conservation group. So it's quite a stretch to call them guys a conservation group. Preparing to perform necropsies on the dead sperm whales. Right? That sounds pretty stoic, pretty noble, but it's simply not true, as you'll see. The whales were found stranded on Saturday night, this last Saturday, I guess, Hardy's Channel in P.E.I. in Bideford, P.E.I. By the next morning, one of the three had already died. The other two died soon after. So they were alive when they came ashore. They all came ashore into one place. And that's an emaciated whale. It's not maybe. It's not perhaps. It's not. It's getting pretty thin there. That's an emaciated. It takes a long time. Their favorite food is squid. And they'll dive quite deep all day long. And they're spectacular. They were. All the gray whales will be gone soon. But in one more year, there'll be no gray whales. They're all emaciated last year. We'll cover that coming up. I'm going to walk you through the reasons I'm making the assertions I'm making. I'm going to provide you with the documentation for all of it. These are complicated stories, right? So you assume everybody don't know nothing about it. And so if you stay here and if you're smart, you'll stay here, and I'll feed you all the documentation so you can make informed decisions based upon the facts, not conjectures or opinions or anything like that, because we don't do that here. Because I'm an idiot. Instead of getting a radio show where I don't have to work like a dog to tell every story, I choose the hardest path, the path nobody's ever traveled before, actually. Nobody's ever come out and challenged the industry with an educational program in history. It just never happened. I can see why. I'm getting beat up so much. The whole world hates me. On the beach, they convinced the whole world I'm a bad person, so that's good for them, right? The truth is the truth. And that's the only thing we're good at, is telling the truth. Here we go. Strap yourselves in, hang on tight. Explained veterinarians moving the bodies to a suitable place for necropsy. Really? That's a very unusual request, by the way, because we cover all the dead whales worldwide. And this is a very unusual request, is to move the whales somewhere convenient. Whales don't like to be convenient. They're not just... If they're going to be convenient, you never have a whale necropsy. 1 in 1,000 will get a necropsy, basically. But next morning, one of the three had died, the other two soon after. Yeah, because they're emaciated. They starved to death. They don't have the right bootlicker to go there to do the necropsy. If they bring in a regular veterinarian or whoever, because since it was a remote location, but they're always remote locations. What do you want to do? Roll up the beach in your fucking city or something? Excuse the language. I'm tired of that narrative. Let's go all the way back in 2011 when Fukushima's event happened. I'll explain Fukushima event. Fukushima was really special. The releases broke the food chain worldwide. And I highlight that part of the narrative tonight. We have that in our poll. Did the Fukushima radioactive fallout break the entire food chain worldwide in the first 20 days and then forever? Because that's what happened in 2011. All the stories we're going to cover are post-Fukushima nuclear event. 4 reactors, 8 fuel pools, 36 reactor cores, and most of them in the fuel pools. And you get an average of around 6 reactor cores per building every decade of fuel from a single reactor. And it needs a decade and a half, 2 decades before you can start moving it out of the fuel pools. It's a very difficult thing on top of that. Anyway, let's keep rolling here. So we can count on each building having 8 reactors in the 8 reactor cores at the top of the building and the 2 fuel pools at the top of each of the 4 melted reactors in Japan. These were pure uranium plutonium reactors. I'll show you the pictures of them. And Chernobyl, for instance, was a graphite reactor. It was a small reactor. It was a new reactor. It didn't have decades of reactor cores stored at the top of it in fuel pools. And the graphite is totally different compared to the pure uranium plutonium. So each reactor in Japan was equivalent to about 100 Chernobyls in plutonium, uranium, americium, neptunium, strontium, curium, which is the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod. And you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, which is named after the devil. Japan considered moving capital away from Tokyo because it's like a banana, Dana. Okay. Yellowish residue, which was the radioactive pollen. And the apologists used to say, no, it was snowing. Well, how can it be snowing and having pollen too, I wonder? Well, now it's normal post-Fukushima because you destroyed the ecosystem, the biota in the soil and the bacteria, the fungus for the roots and everything. So the forests now are wonky. They don't soak up water anymore, right? So when you get lightning strikes now, you're having crazy forest fires and flash floods because the water doesn't get sucked up anymore. We know this because of post-Chernobyl, how the forest reacted. So the radioactive pollen, which is 4,000 radioactive, I can't remember the numbers, we got it there, right? Not tonight though. There's crazy numbers per cubic meter of air. Will reach the capital. You mean the planet, is more like it. Enormous amount of plutonium and number 4 spent fuel pool in danger of catching fire. Enormous amount of plutonium. So the 4 buildings would have had at least 56,000 pounds, 250,000 pounds rather, of plutonium. Is that right? Yeah, the site did. The 4 reactors and the 36 reactor cores that are missing from these 2 buildings, there's 4 buildings, by the way, not 2, that lost their inventories, which is 36 reactor cores. So these were 190 foot, 65 meter, 19-story buildings. They're 150 feet wide. And I'm going to lay a foundation to talk about 3 dead sperm whales. That's the way it is. So you can appreciate why we're conflating radioactive fallout with a broken food chain and then by proxy then the species and today sperm whales. We covered a lot of dead sperm whales over the last 14 years, right? So I'm going to bring up a bunch of those headlines so we can revisit that stuff. So if you look at the lower part, just hang on a second. Let me change. The only problem with using this, I can zoom in, right? But the problem with it is I got to switch back to the other picture each time. So the pictures do full width because I haven't worked out where I smurfed up to. So this piece here is the bottom of reactor 4. It's the other side of this building over here. But you can see the guts hanging out of reactor 4. Let me back it up for you, actually. Right, so you can see the guts are hanging out of it. There's nothing left to the building. The building should be 190 foot, 19-story. So what they done is they put contraptions, they built off-site, reassemble it over the reactors, and this is what it looks like. But when you zoom in, and you won't see this picture anywhere else, by the way, they accidentally released a very high quality picture. 2015 was it, or 16 or something? And when I got that, I was able to extrapolate all kinds of stuff like this, where you can zoom in and you get to see what it actually looks like. But officially, inside of that contraption that they put on top of it, they built off-site. And let me give you one more. So the buildings are so destroyed, number 4 to your right, behind me, that's so destroyed that the contraption they put over it doesn't physically touch it. Right, here's another unusual picture. And so that top part is a cantilever. It doesn't physically touch the building. But the idea was to convince you that they're in a fuel pool and they got all the fuel out of the building. The fuel was at the top of these buildings. And what I mean by they, that's CBS Seth Dorn, who's a senator's son, by the way. I'm just going to play this 40-second clip. And then the last show ended early. My apologies for that. Remember, I stopped because I was my throat was all messed up, but I had a little boo-boo, and I just stopped the show and went and dealt with it after. You got to remember, I spent 4 to 5 days in bed, sleeping all day long. Then I would do a show, if possible, that night last week, right? Save up all my energy just to do a show. It brings back terrible memories of when I got hurt years ago. Let me play this video for you. It's a short video. This is the media claiming they're at the top of the building to your left. The picture will get clearer because this is a. Remember, this happened a long time ago, so the high quality pictures. We'll figure it out.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
Right, so it can't look like that 150 feet above the stump to your left.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
But you can't be because the building to your left doesn't exist.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
It doesn't work that way, right? You're at a nuclear meltdown, your organs will melt. You can't be... Even if you did have a contraption over it, you couldn't get above it. So cesium will pulse 600 feet every second. The neutrons will go through like absurd material and destroy your organs right away.
1,500 highly radioactive
ABC
fuel wells
Australia.
inside this pool. They've got a...
They can't be at the top of the building. So that's CBS, the biggest media in the United States. Remember, BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes is the biggest media, BBC, in Europe, arguably. I've heard it argued and argued successfully. CNN, of course, is worldwide, very popular in many different Anglo-Saxon countries. ABC Australia is the biggest on that continent. And that's why I chose to... I made this 13 years ago, or 12 years ago. They can't be on top of a building that don't exist. So don't think of it as the journalists as much as the media had to orchestrate this. So this is important because for you to appreciate the story, the true story of what happened, they couldn't do this and pretend that they're on top of that building without all the universities and all the media worldwide, at least minimum, participating in that lie. They couldn't do it without that consensus, right? It had to be symmetrical throughout the media worldwide for the lie to work. They're in on it. So it's not a far stretch to suggest that that foundation we're going to talk about tonight is in on it too. It's not a very far stretch now to look at these foundations, which are telling you that they don't know what's going on. They don't know why the animal died. They got to do a necropsy when you can just, if you got any kind of soul at all, you can look at the animal and say it's severe emaciation. It died of starvation, died of a broken food chain. Right, and that's why we got that poll tonight to highlight that for the show. Did Fukushima radioactive fallout break the entire food chain worldwide in 20 days and forever? 13 likes and 12 viewers and 13 votes on arguably the most important story in history. Let's keep it rolling here. So, unprecedented, largest animals on Earth found dead. We're only going to cover the story about the 3 sperm whales that showed up in P.E.I, severely emaciated and died on their shore. And the one pre-Fukushima, you never find 2 whales on the same beach, let alone 3. I'm going to show you. There's really something coming up. Unprecedented, largest animals. So this is just all post-Fukushima stories about the food chain being broken, basically. Just to show you got some legacy stories to go along with the story I'm going to tell you tonight. Very sick, very emaciated. That's a very key word when you come to this site for some reason. Food supplies being killed off. Now, when this was out there, I was out doing research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. I'll show you some of those and the results coming up in a few minutes. Very sick, very emaciated. Very sick, very emaciated. Every bird we're seeing is starving to death. That's the same story we're hearing today. Now they're trying to bring up the avian influenza narrative and conflate that for all the other species too at the same time. But I'm going to show you, for many years, the word avian influenza wasn't mentioned, and there was mass species die-off everywhere. So because people have fell asleep and got lulled away with TikTok and Facebook and everything else, all the social media controversies. And we got 3i Atlas right now. hit behind the sun. The conspiracies of that particular story, something I've never seen before. We've seen lots of space objects, but we've never seen this mass media, videos on YouTube, for instance, mass media covering of a rock from space. We've never seen that before. And they shut down the only one up, I think it was the Jupiter, the only satellite that could have got a picture of it early because it showed up out of the blue. And they shut that one down a week before the rock came past it. Well, not a rock, we don't know what it is. It's a third interstellar. So 3I stands for third interstellar object coming from, the galaxy or deep space somewhere, right? Intergalactic, who knows? There's so many conspiracy theories, I've never seen anything like it. Bizarre die-off on the West Coast. An animal emergency. Bizarre die-off. It was declared an unusual mortality event. Babies found severely emaciated. Big warning sign, tip of the icebergs. When was that story? 2015, I was on the ocean doing research expeditions at that point. All of them are starving. The fish are not there, acting weird, sick, weak, too weak to fly. Alarms raised on the West Coast over unprecedented die-off of nearly endangered marine mammals. More than last month, all of recorded history combined. Carts filled with dead, emaciated bodies. So this is not just the Pacific, though, unfortunately. Entire generations of baby sea lions dying, incredible. There's no good explanation. Expect the same thing to happen repeatedly now. Mysterious deaths in California. Continued trends of whales washing ashore. Animals sick, starving, emaciated, 2 weeks to swim, hemorrhaging. San Diego. Now, each one of these stories were just below these stories would have been the links to all of the mainstream media. So Fox San Diego was the first one I got highlighted up there. The next part would have been a different media talking about the same subject, and then the next one would have been another media. And you would be 6, 7, 8 stories of the mainstream media below each of these headlines. So these headlines were just a consensus of what the mainstream media was saying. Then each one would be a paragraph below the story. That site doesn't exist anymore. There would be a paragraph below the story with a hyperlink, right? And so there would be 6, 7, 8 paragraphs from the different medias. And the headline was just meant to have a conversation in the right direction. Marine mammals are starving. Much larger than anything ever recorded on history. Animals basic dying on our beaches. Now this is true in Canada too, but see the British Columbia coastline from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, where we've done 6 years of research expeditions for 4 to 5 months a year, is 27,000 islands. And it's it was a tropical paradise, a tropical rainforest. And 27,000 islands, 3 million sunkers under the 19-foot tide exchange. So you're always worried about knocking a leg off your boat or tearing up your... I think in 6 years we killed something like 14 props or something just on the outboard on the Zodiac. So hungry they were... So like seals and sea lions, if you get separated from their parents, because before the nuclear come along, there was just massive amounts of them everywhere. They would just eat rocks, and then rocks would be covered in life. And I'll show you that stuff coming up. And then they would be able to get enough energy to excrete the rocks. That was a survival trigger until the mother came back and found them. In case they did get lost permanently, they still could survive because there were so many species in the tidal zones. Extremely emaciated. Mysterious surge. Deaths up 1,500%. Mystifies officials. Extremely emaciated. Seriously ill. Extremely emaciated. Killer whales dying along the Pacific coast. Very sick, emaciated. I think we covered a little bit on the last show about that. 1,000, they were expecting by 2015 or something, 1,000 atoms per kilogram of cesium-137, which is, it's absurd to suggest that's the only isotope that's going to be there. If you got cesium, you got 100 times more strontium-90 being produced. Where would the strontium go if it didn't go with the cesium? It's absurd to suggest it went somewhere else. Seals and sea lions are starving to death. there was a massive die-off of these species. Acute hemorrhaging found in dead owls along the West Coast, not 8 months after Fukushima. Very poor condition, badly emaciated. Extinction threat for loss of salmons, sardines, squid, sea urchins, kelp. Now, during most of these tours, I was on the ocean doing research expeditions. We're going to cover that in 2 more. We may be on the precipice of a major extinction event in marine wildlife. Now, I was out on the ocean doing research expeditions at that time. And here's just one more headline. It is no exaggeration to say that the fate of Japan and the whole world, the entire planet, depends on number 4 reactor at Fukushima. Number 4 reactor is to your left, right? Remember that? The building to your left. So if that's what happens to number 4, and that happens to be number 4, we can expect a catastrophic event worldwide from the radioactive fallout. And in 2015, January 18, I was actually on the ocean doing research expeditions. Okay. And so from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, I carried out extensive research expeditions for 6 years. And me and my trusty sidekick, Zoe, I miss her so much, my goodness. She was something, man. She was special, that one. She done a face plant on every beach we touched in British Columbia, that dog did. So I hit this from every direction. You have no idea. That if I wasn't on the low tide doing research expeditions for 4 to 5 months a year without coming home, and it looks like a lot of fun, right? But it's not. There's nothing fun about it. It was a nightmare. I actually washed up on the beach in a hurricane that night in the Queen Charlotte Islands, or Haida Gwaii, formerly known as the Queen Charlotte Islands. That's my typical day of doing research expeditions. It's not all glamour, despite the fact that it was an enormous amount of work. You're by yourself out there for 4 to 5 months a year doing. And so the reason we done it is we wanted to see if the species recovered. Species were basically wiped out by 2013, maybe a little bit earlier. But we wanted to see if the species recovered, so you had to go back for 5 more years to quantify whether it did or not. And you have 4 of these buildings. It's hard to comprehend that 4 buildings can have that kind of an impact upon all the species worldwide, right? I can understand it. I get that. You got to realize how much inventories we're talking about. These were not like Chernobyl. Chernobyl was brutal. You go watch my Chernobyl presentations for the anniversaries, and the last 2 I done, I don't know about this year, I can't remember, but the year before and the year before, for instance, if you watch those 2, you're looking at around 900 studies, so you can see, it doesn't matter that it's Chernobyl. It shows you how the industry perceives radiation emissions. Right? They know everything there is to know about radiation. There's nothing they don't know about it. There's nothing they don't know about radiation. Let me explain that very quick. I can do that in 20 clicks. 20, maybe 25. We'll go right fast through it. It's just meant to give you an insight of what they study when it comes to radioactive isotopes. So all of these studies were based upon damage from ionizing radiation, small amounts too, very tiny amounts, not perceivable. So when you look at these studies, you can see and you can appreciate, so this line's down here, that's the people that participated. They're paying mortgages and sending their kids to summer camps and all the sports activities. They're the ones that really participate in everything in their communities because they're stealing money and they're not doing the job they should be doing. So when you look at these studies on radiation, you start appreciating they've studied everything. There's nothing in the ecosystem they haven't studied because everything's been poisoned by anthropogenic man-made radiation. And the reason they're applying the studies is because nothing out there has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So the radiation attacks everything with replicating cells. And your responses to it is white blood cells. So radiation is, if it's in a bird or mammal or animal or human or whatever, whales, the physical atom, you put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. But when it comes to man-made radiation, you put a single one of those atoms in your body, or a bird or mammal or animal, whatever, or whale, and it pulses energy at the speed of light every second. So it's wrecking chromosomes, DNA, cells, everything else. Permanent lesions to your organs, which is causing... So your body now is under siege with white blood cells. They're trying to repair the damage every second, can't keep up with that, from the explosions, from the so-called Becquerel. And then it has to attack the source, and it does that every second for the rest of your life. So the white cells you produce in the response is massive, but it's permanent. And so every white blood cell we're producing, birds, mammals, animals, or whatever, you're producing all of these white blood cells now permanently from a single atom, and they never come in single atoms, by the way, anymore. Anthropogenic man-made atoms. And then your body has to displace red blood cells for that to work. And so that means you're producing a lot of white blood cells, less red blood cells. Red blood cells carries oxygen and nutrition. So for birds, mammals, animals, and the forest creatures, the meadows, the biotas, and everything else, this is devastating stuff. And look at all the people that participate in these studies. There's probably, in North America, there's at least 1 million of these studies produced each year. They study anthropogenic man-made radiation more than the elements from the solar system. So the man-made stuff is not from the solar system. So they know everything there is to know about radiation. This is just a fraction of that stuff. But they study everything. They've studied everything, and they study it again and again. And different institutions will study the same thing, and it costs enormous amount of money for each one of these studies. They know everything about it. And they also know that what I'm telling you is accurate. Okay, so we've done the research expeditions because we had the documentation of the radioactive fallout. I'll give you some of that. Radiation levels in the United States West Coast because it broke the food chain, right? Remember, keep your eye on the ball, right? The food chain got broken. That's what the story is tonight. That's why the whales are dead in P.E.I. But I'm going to show you the documentation for my assertion. I'm not going to make the assertion without, because this is an educational program. So this was the French government, the IRSN, the French government. Radiation spiked, so they're confirmations, right? It's spiked. Okay, I'll show you how radiation works from anywhere from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, all do the same thing. And then we're going to use Fukushima as the example. But what they were talking about was cesium-137, which pulses, each atom pulses energy 600 feet every second for 300 years. It's 1 million to 10 million times. So pre-Fukushima radioactive fallout numbers. So whatever cesium we created from the nuclear bombs is still here because it's not 300 years later, right? So if you look at the pre-numbers and then you put it, and we don't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against, nor does any of the species on the planet have an autoimmune trigger to defend against the anthropogenic man-made poison, which is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, by the way, each atom. So 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima numbers. So this is a spike. This is the French government. This is cesium-137. Cesium-137, and that's an 8-day model of the radioactive fallout, or 7-day model. So I'll play their whole model. So think of a snowstorm coming out of Japan, or 1,000 fuel pools. And we're going to look at 30 days later. For a fuel pool, and Fukushima was a pulse event. You had 36 massive reactor cores of pure uranium plutonium. So this is I'm going to stop it on day 20 for a second. That's day 20. 23. Let me go backwards to the first. I smurfed up. There. That's 20 days later. So the whole planet, including Canada, is covered in an invisible snowstorm. So think of a snowstorm. I'm going to do that again, and I'll play the whole thing out. So think of an invisible snowstorm coming out of Japan. And the snowstorm spreads out. And the snow never melts, the snow never goes away, and the snow never stops coming out. It does that for millions of years. now you can appreciate nuclear. There's 1,000 fuel pools after 30 days. That's what they produce, and then they never stop releasing the isotopes because the fuel pools have no containment and they're still splitting atoms. Now, the fuel itself, there's the gamma shine, the massive gamma shine, the neutron burst, and beta rays, and alpha shines, and everything else. So it's in water, but you still can't stop. It's still splitting atoms. The atoms are still being released, still invisible snowstorm. And if you put the numbers that are coming out of the fuel pool, because they're still producing the atoms for millions of homes and businesses, despite the fact that they're not in the reactor core anymore. They're gone through the fuel cycle, which means they're breeder fuel now. And they need that in order to, because this is a perpetual machine now. A fuel pool is a perpetual machine. And so when the buildings blew up and they lost their inventories, you created all these hundreds of trillions of fuel particulates that are splitting atoms into the environment. So we're in a lot of trouble. But it's been going on for 80 years, but Fukushima was a pulse event. And what I mean by that, I'm going to show you some more numbers, is 1 million atoms over the West Coast, but that was all of the planet within 30 days. Each one, whenever you see numbers like this, that's the whole planet within 30 days. There's 1 million becquerels per square meter over the West Coast. Per square meter, that's disposition, radioactive fallout on the ground. So 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131 per liter fell on the United States during post-Fukushima peak. 20 million, I'm sorry. So these are particles. These are from the detonations, from the reactors blowing up, exposing their inventories to oxygen, and then the fuel, because it's coated with zirconium, which is reactive to oxygen. It'll catch fire and burn at 1,800 degrees when it gets exposed to oxygen. This is why it's kept deep underwater. So this is reactor 3 detonating. And there was 8 reactor cores in the fuel pools at the top of the building. You're going to see them start to fall back down to Earth, great big chunks that are leaving huge trails. The trails are the zirconium cladding burning at 1,800 degrees. It ignites the fuel pellets, which burn at around 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And so as this starts to spread out and keep reproducing, everything there is going to reproduce. Have you seen Keanu Reeves? He does this show about, he comes in from another planet and he releases these nanobots, and the nanobots just keep replicating, right? And eventually it eats all the buildings, it wipes humanity off the planet. And the planet is going to be starting over again, so to speak. You ever seen that movie? What's it called? I can't remember. It doesn't matter. I'm sure you've seen it, the majority of you. But that's actually what nuclear does. All these clouds that's be producing is replicating because it's fuel particulates that are splitting atoms forever. Does that make sense to anybody? So when the West Coast got hit with 220 million atoms per liter sustained for weeks, these types of numbers we're talking about is saturated the thyroid glands of all the species right away. Every species, in water and on land. But you can't just have gammas, because that's typical. Gamma is going to saturate the thyroid gland. You got to have plutonium, curium, which is the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rods. These will go into the bones. And now, so every species, including humans, are producing radioactive stem cells and radioactive hormones because the thyroid gland is saturated. The thyroid glands of the children in Japan, I mean, right away it was 6 out of 10 children with diabetes showing up in the prefecture of Fukushima after the nuclear meltdowns. They were expecting that too, right? Within the first year, you had 865,000 extra cancers in the entire country. Excess cancer, not everybody's diagnosed, not everybody got health care. And then you had 13,646 out of 38,200 children with thyroid tumors of around 2 centimeters, which is the size of the thyroid gland of the child. An adult is 3 by 5 centimeters. So you had a tumor the size of the thyroid gland, which meant the thyroid gland is going to be producing radioactive hormones, which is getting stored in the pituitary and the adrenaline glands and everything else on top of that, and is used for all the functions of your body. And then the body, the developing body of particularly children in each species, particularly species that multiply each summer every year, it won't take many generations before they stop reproducing, right? So here we are heading close to 15 years later, And those attributes we're seeing now are significantly manifested, right? So 220 million atoms per liter, I mean, per liter. There's no way you're not saturating the thyroid gland of every species in the ecosystem, in the forest, the meadows, and the ocean also, because this stuff never goes away. It's the same thing with the iodine. It doesn't travel by itself, by the way. There's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133 iodine, 31 times more iodine 129, which was a separate study from Ottawa, Canada, mind you. And it can't be iodine 131 unless it pulses energy at the speed of light every second. So if you got 20 million particles per liter, which can be, we're talking about splitting atoms on its own, each particle. You can't have 20, because they covered it up, right? This was Fraser University. They actually Simon Fraser. They covered it up. The guy, I can play the video for you. He had a pretty good incentive to downplay it. But it can't be at 20 million particles of iodine 131, because iodine 131 has to pulse energy at the speed of light every second. And just bear with me. I'll bring up that professor that covered up that particular story, because that's an interesting. Am I smart enough to find it? Pretty good. Here we go. I transferred a lot of that to a different hard drive to try to. I'm going to adjust the volume. He's talking about nuclear and Fukushima in particular. And here was one of the bizarre statements. Besides, you can see a whole bunch of them right there. You can't conflate the stuff you see in there with a nuclear meltdown. We're in a total different planet.
And living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it.
Now, so if you live next to a nuclear power plant, you get less radiation than you do from the person sleeping alongside of you. This is ludicrous assertions because the fuel pools are splitting atoms. But what was really interesting about that statement was the audience blew up laughing. How did they know it was a joke? I'm sorry, let me do that one more time. Wrong one.
And living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it comes to.
So the audience was in on it in order to know that was supposed to be funny. They were laughing at him because he's so evil. At the end of it, he made a declaration of conflict.
With myself as one of the principal investigators, was awarded $6 million.
A year to make isotopes to stick into your loved ones and screw them up for the rest of their lives. You got to be some sick, twisted individuals to participate in that industry. But by the way, the 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133 are 9 times more effective than the iodine 131 is ionizing and radiating the glands of every species and every human. So you had xenon 133, 131, 132, 133 at enormous numbers. You had 129 at impossible numbers, but yet there it is. And the biggest byproduct is not iodine 129, it's curium isotopes. You can't find it on my Geiger counter, by the way. Those shitty Geiger counters. And by the way, Fukushima monthly fallout higher now than 8 months ago in June 2012. Because, like, after 1,000 days, you're producing 100 times more strontium-90 for every cesium-137. These are perpetual machines. Okay. So we've done the research expeditions for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year. It's enormously difficult, but here's what we discovered. The species to your left are exterminated. The food chain is broken. So I went back for 5 more years to see if the species to the left reseeded the coastline. Because each glass of ocean water should be 1 billion creatures, and 75 to 100 million are the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. And then the rest of them are the eggs and larvae and plant matter and species, sperm and milk and everything else. So the oceans in the summertime should be dirty because all the species are releasing reproduction. So it just floats around in the ocean. The whole ocean is a soup of life. And you couldn't see your hand as far in front of your face a lot of the summers, right? So when you see clean water, in particular, clear water, that's not good. That's the baddest thing you can see. That's not a healthy ocean to see clean water. And so normally I could never put the Zodiac on a beach because the sea urchins would just destroy the bottom of the boat, right? But you didn't care because there was no sea urchins. Even, right, and this is the extreme. You're talking about 19-foot tidal change twice a day. Species to your left, now, I was a commercial diver for 14 years, so I used to feel guilty whenever I was in that environment on the ocean floor because how do you avoid stepping on species? And then because you're out there for so long, you would wait for high tide to go ashore because it was too dangerous to try to go up at low tide. It was stupid to go up at low tide. You're going to fall and get hurt. There are exceptions where heavy winds, you had to put up a beach line, right, and control the movement of the boat. You're going to sit out a storm or something. We've done a lot of that. And so you would wait typically for high tide and go in the Zodiac or one of the skiffs and then put a beach line around a tree and bring it back out to the boat to control, so you can control the boat, right? So the idea to shelter on a little Zodiac, like the big Zodiac, you would tow the little Zodiac beyond the big Zodiac each day. Because you're having 27,000 islands and you're in the middle of nowhere by yourself for months at a time. And the little Zodiac had two motors on the back of it, one for the kicker, because you can't row that thing. But it performed flawlessly the entire time. Same with the big Zodiac. And you would tow the little Zodiac, drop your anchor in the big Zodiac in a group of 100 islands, and jump in your little Zodiac, and then go in an hour before low tide or an hour and a half before low tide, and then stay for the low tide, and come out there an hour and a half, 2 hours after high tide. Not high tide, but when the tide started to rise. And you've done that for 4 to 5 months a year, so you can cover as much coastline as possible. And what we were doing, because you can't do 27,000 islands, if you visit one a day, it'd take you 70 years or something. So we got on a lot of beaches, right? Obviously. You had to document it, so 250,000 plus pictures or something. Ridiculous, it's absurd. Not counting underwater footage, not counting videos. It's an absurd amount of documentation. It's an absurd. So the species to your left, there should be all kinds of clams, razorback clams, little necks, manillas. There's the oysters, the scallops, different species of scallops. There's the whelks, like snails and stuff like that, the periwinkles. There's all kinds of, like shellfish. Then there's around 80 species of starfish. Each species comes in multiple vibrant colors. There would be, starfish were incredible. The sea anemones would be around 80 species. Each species comes in multiple vibrant colors. There was 700 algae. Right? Now there's just a kelp weed and kelp cabbage. I'm sorry, what was the other one? I can't remember anymore. So in the 600 algae, there used to be up to 700 in a lot of places, was 5,500 invertebrates without the backbones that were well known, right? There was 480 species of sea worms. There was incredible diversity, and everything is gone. It's all gone. So I went back for 5 more years to see if the species to your left recover. And they didn't. Now, because I was a commercial diver, I had dove that whole coastline for years. I'm very familiar with all the species. There's no one going to convince me that they don't exist, which is what they tried to do to a lot of people, and they successfully did to a lot of people. But it was incredible diversity. You would feel guilty trying to go there at low tide. Getting on, at the high tide line was 33,000 insects that were dependent upon the tide ebbing and flowing each day. All of it was wiped out post-Fukushima. We went back for 5 more years, 6 years total, to see if the species to your left recovered. They didn't recover. And I was demonized worldwide for doing that. I was vilified. I was attacked. It's a gag order from the Canadian government. Radiation experts is terrifying on the Pacific ecosystem. Now we've seen it in the Atlantic symmetrically. ecosystem has collapsed since Fukushima. Plutonium and uranium is suspected of spreading throughout the food chain. Well, not really. That's exactly what happened. Eerie fog of silence around Fukushima. There's no sound in the no-go zone. So get editor and don't go back. He said it was 865,000 cancers. And for the kids, I forgot to mention that 38,200 children, 13,656 had thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters. That's catastrophic. It used to be 1 in a million. And then it's not just cancer when it comes to the population. It's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. The list is very long. Have you seen Alzheimer's, dementia, and autism, Down syndrome skyrocket post-Fukushima? You better believe you have. Catastrophically so. And younger victims. Now we see it in Australia, like 1-year-olds with dementia. That's the gallows laugh. No, I'm not laughing. South California fishermen skunked. Haven't seen a squid. Usually get 10,000 pounds a day. Complete crashes at the oyster hatcheries. Sardines, mackerels. Pelican sites deserted. 20,000 pelicans nest down there. Then they had like 10 babies or something. Ultra rare whales appear after decades. They're all gone. Shock as the sardines vanished. These are keystone species too, meant to supply a wide diversity of migratory species. Fishermen didn't find a single one all summer. It was about the entire Pacific. We don't know. The young aren't surviving. Now they're trying to blame everything on avian influenza. I mean, you know, millions of generations have come here and raised their fledglings. 46 million are missing from here for the last 5 years. Seabirds, the biggest migratory run on the planet. 46 million that have came here for millions of years to raise their fledglings. And their little ones, right? Didn't show up. Do you really think they went somewhere else? After millions of years of returning to the same spot, they're genetically designed to come here and raise their fledglings, right? It's just built, hardwired into them. Experts suggest bald eagle deaths are related to Fukushima. And it's not just sea animals, right? We're seeing a symmetrical... And it's hard to comprehend that a couple of buildings, there's 4 in total, have lost their inventories and are capable of wrecking our entire planet. That's hard. That's hard to accept. I can appreciate that. That's why I go through all this work. That's why I run myself into the ground all these years. And then I'm up against a very well-funded, a very organized, a very entrenched governmental industries with foundations and everything else that have an endless amount of money to pay people to come out and lie to you on top of that and pretend that they're good when they're simply not. They're zombies. In very poor condition, badly emaciated. Eagles, owls, you name it, all doing it. Drastic plunge in baby California pelicans, 0 born in multiple study areas, from thousands to 10 or less. So we'll get back onto the story soon as we get there. Not too far away. No, we're doing better than I thought. Gray whales faced off fearing as starving whales migrate north. And that was earlier this year in April. The gray whales last year, on their migratory route, are now migrating from north, from Baja, California, are in such poor shape. They were emaciated last year. Right? When they showed, there was no baby survived, gray whale baby, which is the second biggest whales on the planet, survived last year. Let that sink in for a second. And they were emaciated when they got to Baja, California, New Mexico. And then now, they're headed south, and there's severe emaciation. So they're not going to come back north next year, because they're not going to be left. And what are they going to blame it on? They need something, because the time is running out for this industry. There is no nuclear renaissance, right? They got all this fake narrative out there, but they don't have any licenses for the small modular reactor fantasies. They're 50 years trying to produce it. They still haven't produced it. Do you really think they're going to just magically... And then same thing with fusion, right? Why wouldn't you do geothermal? Why would you waste 2 seconds on something so complicated? You need 1 million companies to work and build the parts when you can have geothermal. Why would you do something like that? Because of the poison produced every fuel cycle is released directly into the environment which destroys the whole ecosystem. It took time, and we're 80 years down the road, and now it's manifested with a pulse event, right? Known as Fukushima. They're poor conditions due to changing feeding conditions. So in other words, they're starving. They were already in poor shape last fall when they began their 12,000-mile migration to the breeding and calving grounds. Well, they didn't have any babies with them from last year. They have bulging ribs with shoulder blades and the vertebrae visible even from the shore. It's like that. We're going to show you back to them stories of the 3 sperm whales in P.E.I. soon. We're almost there. Just 1% of the usual number of baby California pelicans, nearly complete failure to breed. Only 20 newborns in areas where 10,000 was expected. Never seen anything like it. None of these are connotations of the avian influenza. Millions of generations of migratory birds have never had avian influenza because it didn't have those attributes. Now, because their immune systems are compromised, it very well could have those attributes, absolutely, because of the radioactive fallout. But that's not what killed them off, is the broken food chain. They're dying of starvation. And that's confirmed endlessly times. The confirmation of the avian influenza are all from the exact same government laboratory. When it goes any other laboratory, it's emaciation. That's quite a coincidence. Mind-blowing die-off in the Pacific far worse than anything seen before. The deaths are puzzling the government scientists. Never seen, never heard of such a thing anywhere in the world. It was, and you know, the die-offs of the birds was extraordinary because when I was out there in 2015, 2016, up by Alaska, United States had acknowledged they had a mass die-off of seabirds of common murres and Cassini auculates. And I covered that in the last show, the beginning of the last show, I think, didn't I? The one that got short, unfortunately, right? There's nothing I could do about it. I've never had that happen to me before, but I had to. That was the end of that show for me. I couldn't make it back to the microphone. It was a good time to cut out anyway, right? It worked out good. So we've never seen none of these attributes pre-Fukushima. So you had common murres, they dive 600 feet all day. They feed on anchovies and squid and sardines and krill, which are like big shrimp, right? Can live up to 10 years. And then the Cassini auculates, which feed on zooplankton, microscopic species. So you had 2 different spectrums of the food chain. You had 1 million common murres, which dive 600 feet all day, can feed on any animal of this size, squid included. Starving it. They're showing up emaciated over vast stretches of coastlines. And the nurseries, of course, failed. And then at the same time, you had 1.4 million Cassini auculates. Again, they try to conflate it with domoic acid and stuff like that. And ultimately, when the research comes out, it wasn't domoic acid. They died of starvation. They admitted that. But they got to throw the turd in the punch bowl because that's who they are. Explosions at Fukushima Unit 1, 3, and 4 may have caused the inventories to be lost from the spent fuel pool. Let's have a look at Reactor 4. Yeah, they had. Wait, now the fuel pool they're saying they're in is at the top of a building that don't exist. Does that worry you? Out in Reactor 1, there's 1 million sieverts on the ground. They use remote control bulldozers to push it into the ocean or bury it. The communities, we're almost back to the story. This is a very convoluted story because it's an educational program. That's how it works. So the communities are to your very far left. The population, you see at the top of the page, is that next row. And this was the disposition of just cesium-137. There's 100 strontium-90 for every cesium-137. Cesium-137 will go to the thyroid glands and your muscles, your heart, cause brutal heart attack, and cardiac diseases, lung disease, respiratory diseases, pituitary thyroid, adrenaline problems too. And then you're going to have 100 times strontium-90. And don't forget the biggest byproduct of the curium isotopes, which is also a bone seeker like the strontium-90, which means you're producing radioactive stem cells. Imagine how devastating that is for the species, let alone the humans. So these people, and the population in this row is the atoms of just cesium-137 only. And we got to assume they're lowballing that number. Because in North America, we were seeing 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. This is per square meter disposition radioactive fallout underground. These are crazy numbers. An evacuation zone in the nuclear plant was 185 atoms, not 229,756 atoms per the same square meter. So they abandoned all of these communities, left the people there, and sacrificed them for the nuclear industry. So don't think they won't sacrifice you for the nuclear industry in P.E.I. Don't think that for 1 second. And there was 55 countries banned the food from half of Japan. For a decade, 20 still banned it. The ones that removed it, Canada wasn't one of those, by the way. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days from the whole country, let alone the nuclear wasteland. So Japan really didn't have anywhere they can ship the most radioactive food after the first 3 months, only Canada. And that's exactly what they've done. And that's why you see such a health crisis across Canada. Obesity rates are up to around 74%, which is what you would expect after a nuclear accident, which is a marker of brain damage. So, which picture is real? Right? This is ABC Australia telling you they're at the top of this building that doesn't even exist.
1,500 highly radio.
Sorry about that. I'll turn that down. That is turned down.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor into a safer location.
That's amazing. How can you be at the very top of the building up by the roof when only a stump exists and it's a nuclear meltdown? You can't even go there without your organs melting in a few seconds. You lost 9 reactor cores in that building. Massive reactor cores, each of them 100 Chernobyls. And we just got 2 more now, then we'll jump back into the 3 sperm whales. Spent fuel at number 2 is steaming. This is March 22nd. Reactor 2 is right between reactor 3 and reactor 1, which are gone. We know that reactor 3 burned constantly for days. That went China syndrome. Okay, here we go again. So the idea of these stories and that picture prominent at the top of it is to condition people to think that it's normal. Right, that picture is normal. Well, that's not a normal picture. They're going to perform necropsy, so the people that are looking at the whale are like, I wonder what he died from. Right? Except for people like me and you, we're looking at it and we're going, that's the shoulder blade. That's severe emaciation. That's not what a whale looks like. That's severe emaciation. But the idea, because you're going to see more of it, is to make them think that this is normal. Because the last thing they want anybody in the community on Facebook or wherever, Instagram, saying, hey, we got an emaciated whale here in our town. Because they're all going to die, right, from the broken food chain. So there's a lot more to come yet. And we've covered so much. If you really want to, you can see some of the stuff, not all of it. If you watch that video, we covered a lot of it too. So if you go to my playlist at the top of my page, this is my page, Environmentalist Dana Durnford. If you go into my playlist and mass species die-off, you click on the bottom of that, view the full playlist. Then you can scroll, you can see all the stories that I covered. These are typically 2-3 hour stories where we cover the most recent die-offs. So I compile the die-offs, and then I get, it's kind of like these shows, not usually as intense with the documentation, but certainly lots of it. And you can see research expeditions in the Zodiac pictures there down here. But like, we cover all of this, so there's no excuse for anybody in the academic community who's behind the 8 ball to come here and pick up. And all the links are below each of those videos, right? Did Fukushima radioactive fallout break the entire food chain worldwide in the first 20 days and then forever? Yes. Here we go. Let's keep it rolling. So, they don't need to perform a necropsy to know the whale is emaciated and that there's the majority of the whales are confirmed emaciation. And if they're floating around, they get hit by a ship, now they'll say it's a ship strike. We'll explain that coming up, the actual numbers of recorded pre-Fukushima ship strikes. Because that makes sense for you once you bring it together. By next morning, one of the three had already died, two other died soon after. Well, that's so even the one behind it, there's another one right behind it. Which is bizarre, pre-Fukushima, to find two dead whales on the same beach. It's bizarre. Now it's like, where's the other ones to? And for every whale you see, at least 10 of them sank. So theoretically, 30 whales died up around there. And they do travel in groups. Tonya Wimmer, the executive director of the Marine Animal Response Society, and I went and looked at her, so we'll give you that information coming up. So one of the first steps is moving the bodies to a suitable place for necropsies. Moving them to a place for necropsies, because they show you that picture. But if you go to their website, you'll see pictures where they could have done a necropsy right there. It's not normal to move a whale. You usually do it where's to. Or you don't do it at all. And then if you look at the picture and you don't know nothing about whales, you might accept that. But if you know a bit about whales, you know they don't look like that. You know that's the shoulder blade sticking up, and you know that's an emaciated animal. She explained veterinarians and pathologists would not be able to do their work on a beach where the whales died, since it was a remote location, which is almost where most of the whales die. And that's where they do most of the necropsies, or in their remote locations. They come in on a float plane, or they come in on a helicopter, or they come in on a Coast Guard boat, or they come in on some foundation boat, right? So these people are very deceptive. I'll show you that coming up. We got commitment from, thankfully, the Lennox Island First Nation to take the animals there and do the necropsies on the beach and then bury them on the site. Why would you bury them on the site? Whales die for millions of years. Hal Whitehead, professor at Dalhousie University Biology Department, said the sperm whales are usually found in waters deeper than 1,000 meters. Yeah, they usually dive in 6,500 feet. To see them in shallower water in the Gulf of St. Lawrence was a bit unusual. No, it's extraordinary. It's like that whale, that humpback whale, that emaciated humpback whale that died in Montreal last year. They've never seen a whale there. And the first one they've seen is emaciated. They're mostly found in deeper parts of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, which is a channel that runs from Cabot Strait, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, right through in towards the St. Lawrence estuaries. Some of the theories about why they were stranded on the beach could be magnetic abnormalities, underwater earthquakes, or sounds made by humans. Because they're just dumb, stupid animals, right? No. These are incredibly intelligent animals that have a genetically predisposition to travel where they normally travel, not go somewhere else. Right? They have millions of generations inbred into them to do certain things. Going up, being emaciated, they're emaciated. They're there because they're emaciated. They're there because you couldn't find food anywhere else, and that was desperation. And it takes a long time for an animal to lose 10 inches of blubber and end up in that kind of condition. It takes a very long time. They couldn't find food, which tells you and me, if you're honest, the food chain is broken. That's another confirmation, unfortunately, that the food chain is broken. There's quite a few ideas there. None of them have a heck of a lot of data to back them up, except for right here. I got a heck of a lot of data, and I'm going to keep showing it to you at night. We're not even into the good stuff yet. And we covered some amazing stuff. A beach sperm whale in P.E.I. in his handout photo from Fisheries and Oceans Canada, the government. That's an emaciated animal. So they're trying to condition people to accept that as normal. When a single animal is stranded, he said it could be because it's sick or old or perhaps confused. Got dementia, right? From the nuclear industry, from 80 years of emission. When there's more than one, he explained, it would usually mean they're fairly healthy. Well, that's not healthy. No, they died from starvation. That's where they're showing up in unusual places so much post-Fukushima. Whitehead said a necropsy is extremely valuable, could give us no idea the cause of death. You don't need a necropsy to know the whale starved to death. And because you got so many of them starving to death with no other attributes, no damage, no entanglements, no ship strikes, none of the typical propaganda they're throwing at you. Had they been hit by ships? Of course, you got to put that out there. All three of them got hit by a ship, did they? Had their hearing been destroyed by sounds in the ocean? So he's a bootlicking, cheerleading lapdog like we cover so many of these professors. They go to university, they get a degree, then they get another degree, and they can recite the book perfectly, and they can't get a job because they're just dysfunctional children, artistically functional children, basically, for the rest of their lives. But they can memorize books. They can fit in society for the most part. So the university will hire them because they're the perfect regurgitating machine for the narrative that whatever industry is controlling the institution, the university wants to put out there. They're willing to come out and cut everybody's throats so they can pretend that they're good people for some reason, that somebody that really didn't like them in the first place. Or are they very thin and poorly nourished? Why would you put that narrative there at the very end of all that other garbage? That garbage can diagnosis that he gave earlier. You don't have to be a genius to look at that and say it's emaciated. You really don't. So let's go talk about some other sperm whales that died. This is 2025. So when Russia had the big earthquake and tsunami, and they had a big tsunami, we just didn't see it very much, but it was on a few places where it was huge waves. Several whales stranded on a beach in Japan, speculating the major tsunami could be the reason. But the whales stranded the day before the earthquake. They didn't strand because of the tsunami. And almost all the media regurgitated that story. And when you look at these sperm whales, they're clearly the back part of them, because you're far away. But it's very easy to tell you that that's emaciated. That's severe emaciation, what you're looking at. And because Japan right now is on its heels for 14 years. It's not hard. All the media came out with this story and blamed it on the Russian earthquake, which was absurd to suggest that this was Russia's earthquake. Let me keep going here. Hello, everybody. So this happened the day before the tsunami and earthquake from Russia. But all the media didn't mind coming out and blaming it on that. But they actually died of starvation, right? Look at this. What a familiar looking picture, right? Look at that picture. That's a sperm whale. Doesn't that look familiar? We showed you earlier. That happened last week. There it is there. There's another familiar looking picture. So eventually I found pictures, detailed pictures, and that's severe emaciation you're looking at, right? That definition, that's the hallmark of severe emaciation right there. That's severe. That's the opposite of what they should look like. The whales that died in the Everglades, oh, that's a different story. Let me go back here. Did I get that? Yeah, that should be down here, I think. Here we go. So, beluga whale population in St. Lawrence on a catastrophic path. This is 2014. That's an older picture. NOAA said it counted 28 whale strikes in northeastern waters between 2006 and pre-Fukushima 2010. And in worldwide, the National Marine Fisheries Service survey covering 1975 to 2002 found 292 records of confirmed or possible ship strikes to large whales. That doesn't mean they died. They didn't all die from the strikes, right? But NOAA said it counted 28 whale strikes from 26 to 2010. But worldwide, it was 200. It was actually 1,200, I think, was the consensus. Oh, that's not supposed to be. So 25 pilot whales dead near Macro Island, United States, 2014. So in 2016, 2017, they stopped doing necropsies on pilot whales because there was mass die-off of them happening all the time. And they like to say, well, they won't get sick, the rest of them follows them up. But they performed on 8 whales that died, showed all the animals had empty stomachs, and pilot whales, and the whales that died in the Everglades, there was 2 different groups, also had empty stomachs. Pilot whales. This was a pygmy sperm whale, severe emaciation. That was recent. This is 2020. That's a severely emaciated sperm whale. The mammal was spotted Tuesday morning. They try to blame it on plastic. Once in a while they'll do that, but it was never confirmed that plastic. Well, they're desperate to eat, so they're going whatever they can find now they're going to eat. And plastic, there's nothing else in their beak. The mammal examined was good health and had been feeding well with evidence of squid beaks in its stomachs, but not for the last 7 to 10 days. Well, like a whale doesn't die of emaciation because it didn't eat for a week. It dies of emaciation because it didn't eat for 10 months. And so if it finds a little bit of food, that's not enough to save its life. It had lost its blubber, right? And now there was no way to save it. They're not designed, right? They're usually a very plumb animal. You never see these indentations on them. Sperm whales that washes up so thin her ribs were protruding. Adult female sperm whale found washed up on the shore. And so we're back to that story. Or wait now, are we? No, this is 2023, BBC. Does that look familiar? That's this severe emaciation. And you can see the whole spinal column sticking up. That's severe emaciation. 2016, mass sperm whale deaths across Europe leave scientists stumped. There's around 30 whales in Germany, Holland, France, United Kingdom. Far from their hunting habitat in the deep North Atlantic, same as the ones we're seeing up in Prince Edward Island. Mass sperm whale death across Europe. See, this is Newfoundland. That's severe emaciation you're looking at right there. That's severe. That's absurdly emaciated. It's been dead for a while, but you can tell that's significantly. When you see whales looking like this, they're alive when they came up, but they're severe emaciation too. And you can see the tail gives it away every time. And so man's fault, yes, the nuclear industry has broke the food chain. It's not your fault. It's not your tin cans. It's not your pop bottles. It's not your plastic. Even though there's a lot of plastic, plastic doesn't pulse energy at the speed of light every second in the bodies of the species and cause the species to have a permanent autoimmune trigger to it. This is severe emaciation you're looking at. Like somebody from Fukushima. That's severe emaciated tails. When you look at these tails like that, that's not a pretty bait. That's 5 dead sperm whales. Why sperm whales are washing up dead on the British shore. The UK government is just absurdly disgusting. They're revolting, eh? The universities, the governments, the pro-nuclear, they're the worst worldwide. Besides, and Australia's pretty bad. Canada's brutal, by the way. They can't rule out Canada. Canada is controlled by the nuclear industry for a long time, since the early 50s. The Secrecy Act in Canada is really something. Still going strong today, right? They still have a lot of the latitude with the government that they had back during the Manhattan Project that they should never have had in the first place. At least 29 have now been found on the coast of the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Germany. We've never seen that pre-Fukushima, by the way, with any of these species. None of these attributes. 7 dead sperm whales dead on the beach in South Australia, 2014. And that's emaciation. You can see just the definitive, you can see the whole spine just sticking out. This one is deteriorated pretty bad. It should have been that one, the first picture. I apologize. 2022. But he died of severe emaciation, that guy. Brutal sperm whale. And this one is severe emaciation. Again, you can see the shoulder blades sticking up. It's very, generally you won't get these types, the right pictures. You'll get the picture that covers up most of the damage. 5 sperm whales stranded on a Dutch beach. They're emaciated. 8 dead sperm whales on a German beach, and they're severely emaciated. Just weeks after, 12 of the sperm whales were found dead on the other sites on the North Shore. 4 dead sperm whales wash up on British beaches. These are emaciated. Heartbreaking images of 7 sperm whales left stranded on Withersea Beach. And that's emaciated. That's starved to death. Right? You can tell that's got no blubber whatsoever. There's no symmetrics to the body. The cartilage is very visible, highlighted through the skin. 14 sperm whales found dead in mass strandings on Australian island. That was 2022. That was just after 600 pilot whales had beached themselves and died in 2 major strandings close by. And after 2016-17, they stopped doing necropsies on pilot whales because it was happening everywhere constantly. But before that, all the mass strandings post Fukushima in 2015-16 were always empty stomachs. The Marine Conservation Program traveled to mass stranding locations. So they got all kinds of money to go there, but they can't bring a veterinarian with them to pull off a necropsy like they do everywhere else. That's interesting. They got lots of money for running around. They got no money. They're investigating. What part do you need to investigate, really? You refuse to acknowledge the animals are emaciated. This is Australia, by the way. But you see these foundations-backed organizations, they're meant to control the narrative. They're the opposite of good people, unfortunately. They know the job exists to be a scumbag. They get an incredible education to get that job. Because clearly someone in their family succeeded, and so they saw it as an opportunity. And this is back to P.E.I. Attempt to rescue a beach sperm whale was complex. You're not going to rescue a beach sperm whale in the middle of nowhere. These are heavier than buses, for goodness sakes. Full of people. And so this was from September 27th. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. So we want to look at that. If you're honest, that's an emaciated whale. It's not maybe or perhaps. It's emaciated. That's not up for debate. That's unassailable. That's an emaciated animal. And by proxy, so are they. So if you can go there and do that, you could do a necropsy, right? They flew in there, they're dressed up, king shit, all the best gear, and then they come out and tell you that they don't know what happened. Well, how could you not know what happened? And that came from their site. How can you not know that happened? How can you not know it's emaciated? How does that work? And they're supposed to be experts. So how can you tell that's not emaciated? Well, they show you that picture, but when you look at this picture, then how can you deny it? 2 sperm whales stranded off P.E.I. have died, 3rd in poor condition. Poor! That's an understatement of a lifetime. In a tough spot, not in good condition, no. Everyone's quite upset and heartbroken. So the more the folks are there locally, will continue to monitor the animals. And what's going on is the locals found the whales. And so they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. And then the foundation, which works hand in hand with fisheries and oceans and government agencies and universities, goes there to control the narrative. They're the spokesperson instead of the people that found the whale and people that know the oceans. these people show up and control the narrative. That's their job. And they don't give a shit about anything. They're so compartmentalized, they actually think they're good people. 2 sperm whales stranded off P.E.I. have died. Third's in poor condition. Sorry. Tonya Wimmer, Executive Director of Mars. What an arrogant acronym to take over, right? My goodness. She reminded people to keep a distance. You're not like us. Stay away, you plebes, from the whale and leave them be. Meanwhile, they're up there kicking tires. Her cases, eh? I'm better than you. That's their narratives. That's their routine. Doomsday-like radiation release from fire at Fukushima Unit 4 would be a global catastrophe. So if that happens, it's a global catastrophe, you say? If that happens, it's a global catastrophe. Guess what? That happened. That's Unit 3P on me blowing up again. Response group. Yeah, their job is to talk to the media, and the media's job is to regurgitate word for word whatever they tell them. All 3 beach sperm whales in P.E.I. dead conservation group. Right there, the media is only allowed to talk to them. Notice how they didn't interview the communities? Oh, the community's heartbroken. Their job is to control the narrative. That's what they're doing. We need a necropsy. We don't know why the whale died. And anybody tells you something like that, looking at that animal, is not a very good person, okay? They're nobody's friend. Except for the industry itself. So how and why the animals ended up off the coast of the northern Prince Edward Island is a mystery. Something to be studied, Tonya has told us. Really. We got to give you all, everybody should donate to you, right, Tonya? The Marine Animal Response Society said a social media post that it would work. Social media post. They're quoting the social media post. So the community post, that's how they found it in the first place, the community post on social media. It would work to see if necropsies can be done in the whales to find out what may have caused their death. Gee, I got no idea. It's emaciated whales like all the other whales. You don't suppose the food chain got broken in 2011. Probe underway into how the 3 sperm whales washed ashore in P.E.I. Right, so all the big scumbag media comes out and regurgitates whatever the propaganda wing wants out there. Marine Animal Response Society, charitable organization dedicated to the marine animal conservation in the Maritimes. Don't look anywhere else, just turn to them only. They don't know what happened. They don't know. The whale looks fine to us. It must be ship strikes or underwater volcanoes or something drove them up there. They didn't starve to death, clearly. No, they starved to death. And the idea is showing you that picture, and all the media showed you that picture to condition those who don't have a clue that is normal. That's what that was all about. Handout photo provided by the Canadian government themselves. So clearly, the Marine Research Organization, get my angle, get this angle for me. No, try this angle. Let me see those pictures. Delete that one. I don't want that one out there. I can hear her now. Absolutely heartbreaking. 3 sperm whales die on What do you mean heartbreaking? So this got a lot of social media from the communities, and then the foundation showed up then to cover it up for the nuclear industry, because Canada wants a nuclear innocence. Canada is run by it's controlled by the nuclear industry. It's 100% controlled. Yeah, what's up? That's right, James. Good one. We're not sure if the animal simply got confused and sort of made a wrong turn. Really? You think that animal got confused, do you? It went all the way up there because it starved to death. And people at P.E.I., this video is for you. It's dedicated to you. You should share this among yourselves. You should make sure your loved ones watch it and your friends and your family watch it, so that you got a real narrative to work with. That's why I've created this video tonight. I've done this for you. I was going to shoot a video last night, and a 1-minute video and put out there. I said, that's not fair. because you got to deal with some real wicked creatures. You got people like Tonya and Andrew and Danielle, very well funded propaganda machines due to a response specialist, financial administrator too. Wow. Tanya, look at me now. The kids back home can only see me now. Oh, a big successful girl now. That's what she's doing right there. I'm special. You're talking about the most morbid topic on the planet, and she's there looking, trying to do her model routine or something. She got 20 years experience studying a variety of species, starting with her graduate research at no less than the propaganda machine in the arm of the nuclear industry itself, to Dalhousie University, and working as a consultant with various governments and industry and non-government organizations. She's in the groove. Look at me, everybody. We done it again. She probably spits on the ground every time she sees a civilian. She's enjoyed working side by side with other researchers, government, and industry. What the hell, man? She enjoyed it, did she? Or the paycheck she got from it. Tonya is a member of the Canadian Right Whale Recovery Network. People like me can never get on these boards. A board member of the Right Whale Consortium, a steering committee member for the Entanglement Working Group, which is what you want to blame it on instead of the fact that they died of starvation. The Canada-United States International Advisory Committee for Right Whale Recovery, and a member of the International Whaling Commissioning, Stranding, and Bycatch Initiatives. Wow, they cover it all, eh? They're good. I've got to give them credit. They're the elite criminals of society. To understand and protect these incredible species require hard work and dedication from all people and all the investors to fund their little deceptive and deceitful and dishonest organization who study and manage them. Oh, you manage whales, do you? You chase them all over the ocean, yell at them? Wouldn't surprise me, actually. And those that use our oceans. Our oceans. That's incredible. Like, if you know anything about grammar? Oops. Grammar. Our oceans. Her oceans, what she's saying. Mars. What an arrogant acronym to use for a company. Strive to reduce the impacts of these species. The research colleagues and marine mammal response and research colleagues who all strive to reduce the impact of these species from any threat, except for nuclear. This is Neptunium-239, decays Plutonium-239 in 2.5 days. Does that make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside? All you do is take a blood sample of the whales, and you'll see massive white blood cell counts. And because he bioaccumulated so much radiation, you can probably read it with a Geiger counter from 20 feet away, 300 feet away for actually. So this plume model is only based on 20 days of radioactive fallout. It's not based on the actual destroyed buildings and the inventories that were lost that I showed you earlier. It's based on a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of a percent of a percent of the inventories that were lost. Each of the buildings that were lost around 6 million pounds. A bomb typically uses 10 pounds. 4 buildings were lost. So this decays to plutonium-239, plutonium-239. Let me show you how the plutonium isotopes play out. That's always fun. Yeah, we slept all last week. I was sick. Like, I just ran out of energy. They took me out of the game. We've been trying to keep this whole operation moving forward for so long, right? I'm ran into the ground, but I still have the go into me. I still have the passion. I still have the commitment. I just don't have... I'm not young anymore, right? And got a big operation that's barely functional anymore. We're doing the best we can. Neptunium-239. What did I need? Oh, yeah. the animal studies. Just let me show you this one study from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute of New Mexico, which is the United States Navy research laboratory. It's an incredible laboratory. So they took 144 beagle dogs and puppies. Who knows where they got them to? And beagle dogs got the big nose. They do there's some irony there, trust me. And they don't bite the scientists, right? They're not the aggressive species typically. They're very docile, very loving, very friendly, very happy type dogs. And so it's exceptionally cruel to use an animal like that in these studies. Death from the radiation occurred and all the dogs died from the radiation exposure with 1.5 to 5.4 years. Tumors of the lung, skeleton, liver occurred beginning about 3 years after the exposures. Single mono-dispersal inhalation, very small dose. Bone tumors, so they get 3 different tumors from the radiation, from the plutonium isotope. Bone tumors in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death, so they let them live out their whole life till they die. Then in necropsy, a lot of times they'll just sacrifice the animals, they'll kill the animals and then they'll study the isotopes, right? These they let them live out their lifespan, so 96 dogs died. Most common cause of death was bone tumors. Bone tumors are a brutal way to die, by the way. Lung tumors in 46 dogs were the second most common, but they're scientists, so it's okay, right? Liver tumors were found in 20 dogs, were the cause of death in only 2 dogs. Occurred later than tumors in the bones and the lungs. So the bones showed up first and typically took it to the vast majority of the dogs in the most brutal way conceivable. They would have suffered right till the end. They're scientists. They're better than me and you. You know that. Tumors in these 3 organs, they're like Tonya. They're better than us. Or what's her name? Well, I don't really care, actually. Tumors in these 3 organs often occur in the same animals where competing causes of death. The findings in dogs suggest similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed to plutonium. But there's a problem with that story. Some big problems, actually. One of the problems was it was discovered that human kidneys are at least 50 times less efficient than animal kidneys at removing the plutonium. So you're 50 times more likely to die of 3 different tumors than all the dogs that died from the exposures of plutonium, which is every one of them. So you're 50 times more likely to die from that exposure than the dogs are. Okay. And so the biggest byproducts of the radioactive fuel rods is curium isotopes. So not iodines, not cesium, not plutonium, but curium isotopes. And it was discovered with curium isotopes, you require lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium. And curium isotopes is the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel. And so imagine what they do to the dogs. And that study was by the same Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico. Dr. Raymond Gilmedi is the lead author, which is the United States Navy Research Institute that brutalizes animals. So when you see these types of stories, highly radioactive glass rained on Tokyo, 240 kilometers away from Fukushima, at 500 trillion becquerels a kilogram, highly radioactive fallout, at numbers we've never even conceived. Don't think that didn't happen in Canada, United States, and the rest of the planet for 2 seconds, because it did. And then the Krypton 85 that was over Tokyo, which was 400,000 atoms per cubic meter of air, or per square meter on the ground, that would have been the same too in North America, Krypton. So when you see a neptunium-239 dispersal that decays to plutonium over 25 days, every 2.5 days by 50% to plutonium-239, that's the whole planet. It's all the water, fresh and salt water in the entire planet. But it can't just be plutonium, see? And that's why people... let me go backwards for a second. Tonya, no, it is Tonya, I got it right. Tonya Harding, or whatever her actual name is. Wimmer. She's out there everywhere. And her job is to sing a cover story to lull people into complacency. And they're the executive director of a massive public relation firm controlled by industries. They're not some independent group of good people at all. They're players. Their job is to control the narrative. And that's why you see them quoted in all the mainstream media, who didn't bother interviewing the victims and the communities close by. They brought in outside perps, actors. And then you don't need enough necropsy to know the animal died of starvation. It's blatant. If you got a morsel of humanity in you, that's blatant. Unprecedented spike of 1,500 atoms of sulfur. This is the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyball. It's created by spraying salt water on the reactors that were burning at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. You liberate the sulfur. The sulfur becomes a spherical ball, and it can ingest the isotopes, uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, curium, whatever, and become super hot, super mobile particles. And so when you inhale it or consume it or drink it or wash in it or do your laundry in it or your dishes in it, you become infected with this foreign element that pulses energy at the speed of light in your body every second, wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells. It's a nasty to all species. It breaks the food chain, and then the animal shows up. The big animals will show up emaciated. So radiation doses in the Northeast and the Great Lakes were equal to the West Coast. The whole planet was buried in this stuff. The West Coast originally got massive coverage because there was a mass die-off species, so it got a lot of attention, right? But it was going everywhere else too at the same time. Massive radioactive releases at Fukushima going on almost for 3 years. Visible steam is just the tip of the iceberg, and the containment vessels are broken. The visible steam, and just one more study to think about in 2019, congenital heart disease. Corrective surgery was at 14.2% per 100,000 births for complex congenital heart disease, neonates and infants. That was across the whole country. That's 14,200 children needed open heart surgery. This is just unimaginable numbers we're talking about. And so it's not just cancer, it's not just heart, lung, liver, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. It's Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, and schizophrenia. That's why they always use the connotations of radiophobia, right? Or they say you're just fear-mongering and everything else. There really is health issues, mental health issues, because you're producing more white blood cells than red blood cells, so you have less oxygen, so you're less rational. It's an imposed illness and disease and autoimmune deficiency and injury. It's an assault. That's not an opinion either, by the way. That's the fact. The only sad thing about it is there's so many of these Tonyas out there. We cover it all the time, but it still doesn't cease to blow my mind how many of these Tonyas are out there. There's too many. You can't have a future with people like that in positions they went to university to get the job, to get the education so they can get that job to do exactly what they're doing. They don't get the job any other way. They went to the university to get an education to get that job, and they were recommended in after that, right? They might not know the difference. They might be so compartmentalized because someone close to them is in the industry and then made it possible for them to get their education the way they did and then got a job because they knew they were players. And once you join that corruption, you don't get the job unless you have those missing chromosomes and DNA, unless you're one of those people that can be counted on, see? She can be counted on to be ruthless. And we know that because she got the job. That's how it works. That's the reality we live in. Most people have no concept, and hopefully the people in P.E.I. and the natives there and everybody else watches this material, shares it, downloads it, keeps it, and uses it to educate their children and their loved ones so that we can have thousands or even millions of little bastards like me out there are not going to be tricked or manipulated or deceived or coerced or victimized by these lapdogs. You think it's possible to make a siltation type drug test urine strips to detect radioisotopes? Absolutely, man. Or the side effects from it. That's a great idea. I love it. James Lucid. That's who the first song tonight was. And so my comment section won't show up for about 12, 13 hours. So if I put a link, it's in there, you have to come back 12, 13 hours later to find that link if you're watching this later. That's the show tonight, anyway. That went pretty good. There's such a good thing. Such a thing as good in this industry. Let me get back to her. Let me see. What was I going to say? Doing better today. Still a bit slow. Now officially a year older. Not too happy about that. But at least my health is getting back again. Getting my sense of humor back again. Getting my taste back again. And I was trying to bring in the alternate Dana guest. I was going to dress up. I got most of the stuff now, right? It's so much work. I'm trying to figure out how do I do that because it's an absurd amount of work. It means I can only do 3 shows a week. Even though I'm going to try to do 5 shows a week, but I know that'll run me into the ground. But if I was to do 3, I'm not saying I'm doing that, but let's say I've done 3 shows a week, which doesn't make me very happy because this is such an important subject. The only reason we're doing what we're doing is because it's the most important subject. And we need to keep pressure on this industry, and we need to keep producing material so the world finds us and says, well, this is still ongoing, this is still a thing. And once they watch any of these shows, they know this is not a game anymore, hopefully. And, it's a very persuasive show for policymakers and investors to walk away from the nuclear industry. It's a very persuasive show. If you're a policymaker and you've been spoon-fed the propaganda machines your whole career, you find someone like me, and all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, that's a narrative I didn't see coming. Because that's the reaction you're going to get. I know because I've talked to some of these people. And they're like, we had no idea. I had no idea that this is how it really was. And you can't debunk me, or you would have been at it a long time ago. They have lots of attack dogs attacking me. They have lots of scumbags working for them. There's 1,000 public relation firms out there to make people turn away. They'll find all kinds of propaganda on Dana. But if you watch my videos, you'll say, well, he's a pretty reasonable guy. He's not some crazy, drooling lunatic like the media makes me out to be, some scary fearmonger or something like that. I provide the documentation for my assertions. Nobody else does that for you. You know why? Because it's a stupid amount of work. It's a retarded amount of work. It's an absurd amount of work. So I got 2 sets of progressive glasses. I got my other ones sent in now because I got a scratch on them because they're still covered under warranty. Get those lenses replaced that I just had replaced. Oops. I just got 2 new sets of progressive glasses, so they got 3 different lenses. That's a bit hard on me. And then I just there's a glass shop that's going into business, so I ordered in prescription sunglasses because it's hard for me in the winter times, out in the snow and everything. Like we got to Skidoo to do research for species, but there was no snow last year, right? And I couldn't afford to tow the Skidoos all over God's creation, right? That don't mean I'm going to give up. I don't mean I'm going to slow down. We still need a new outboard motor for the big Zodiac, right? That I shouldn't even try to. The one I got now has been down for 2 years. This is absurdness when we got a mass species die off. So I'm heartbroken over that. I haven't given up. I don't know how to give up. I don't have it in me. It's not in my DNA anyway, right? I'm like the whales. You always do, or the birds. You've been doing it for millions of generations. They have that kind of auto trigger. I got that too, I like to think. Unfortunately, so does Tonya, and it's not a good attribute at all. It's terrible, but excuse me. So James just put out another song for the show when live. It's really good. But who is James? People don't know who you are, see? And so the song I started off with tonight was one of James's songs. If you go over to his website, you'll find a link in the description under today's headlines. There's a lot of legacy headlines. And we're going to cover that story he wrote the song about is actually one I'm going to cover tomorrow night. And because I got a lot of the legacy headlines of that community, so I can really... And so I'm going to play... Because I got this song on my head again today. So he's got a Fukushima farming. And I'm not going to play that tonight. I should, but you should go over to his site, James Lucid. There's a link in the beginning and one in the description so you can find it. I want to hear, because I'm selfish, I want to hear Radioactive Hudson River. This is about Indian Point, releasing more radioactive water into the ocean. It's a beautiful song, like the song we played tonight, the first one. And hopefully that encourages people to go visit his site, because you heard the song tonight, that first song was amazing, right? Well, so is that one. He's got a lot of them. The first song we played, I put a link in there, The Stranding O' the Flirt. Let me show it to you. So if you scroll down, I thought it was right there, but I was wrong, was I? There it is. See that girl there? That's the song we started off with tonight. And the one we're going to play tonight, because I'm a selfish bastard, is the Radioactive Hudson, because I'm just addicted to it. It's one of those songs that it invokes a feeling, right? That it's just weird how it worked, eh? Let's see everybody on the next show. I'm going to play my version. You should go over and listen to his version. Or I can do it the other way, I suppose. Let's do it this way. Radioactive Hudson. It's just a little easier for me if I do it this way. We'll see you. Have a nice night. Hugs for everybody. See you on the next one.
Radioactive Hudson Run, Indian Point, the record done. 60 years along the bed. The plan is closed, but now the end. The Hudson board, the daily waste, outfalls hidden years of race. Permit sign, the crowd objected. Federal law kept it protected. Now old tag owns the siding tire. Fuel and waste to slow expire. 45,000 gallons stored. The court unlocked the outlet door. Radioactive Hudson, burning coal.
wastewater carried to the shore. Environmentalists claim it's small, but none of that explains it all. The irony sharp, the ruling clear, rights revised to serve Holtec here. Radioactive Hudson, hurting core. Holtec claims the dose is sure. 45,000 gallons sent away. The Hudson bears it day by day. Say the Hudson, the voice is cold. The river bears the weight of from Buchanan to the Bay. Families live with what they say. 60 years the plant was run. The Hudson keeps what's been undone.